Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, February 25th, 2022. President Joe Biden nominating federal appeals court judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to a seat on the Supreme Court to replace the retiring Justice Stephen Breyer. President calling the nominee a proven consensus builder who has a pragmatic understanding that the law must work for the American people, and also that she strives to be fair, to get it right, to do justice. If confirmed, she'll be the first black woman to serve on the Supreme Court. We'll hear from the president and the nominee in just a moment. Russia pressing its military invasion of Ukraine with Russian troops, tanks, and artillery moving in on the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, as NATO leaders hold an emergency virtual meeting, President Biden attending from the White House Situation Room, and NATO Secretary General saying that NATO Response Force, or NRF, will be deployed for the first time, sent to Eastern Europe to help protect NATO countries there from any Russian threat. And the U.S. joining the European Union in sanctioning Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov personally. On COVID, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention relaxing indoor mask-wearing guidance, something that many state governors have already done. CDC saying that areas of the country will be divided into risk categories, low, medium, and high, depending upon coronavirus transmission rate and other factors. And we begin at the White House and the Supreme Court nomination. President Biden began his remarks with a reference to Russia's war on Ukraine.
Today, as we watch freedom and liberty under attack abroad, I'm here to fulfill my responsibilities under the Constitution to preserve freedom and liberty here in the United States of America. And it's my honor to introduce to the country a daughter of former public school teachers, a proven consensus builder, an accomplished lawyer, a distinguished jurist, one of the nation's most prestigious courts. My nominee for the United States Supreme Court is Judge Ketanji Jackson.
President Biden at the White House. Associated Press writing that Jackson, if confirmed, would be the current court's second black justice. Justice Clarence Thomas, a conservative, is the other, and just the third in history. She would replace liberal Justice Stephen Breyer, 83 years old, who's retiring at the end of the term this summer, so she won't change the court's 6-3 conservative majority. Also, she would be only the sixth woman to serve on the court, but she would join three others already there, including the first Latina, Justice Sonia Sotomayor. And also this from AP, her nomination is subject to confirmation by the Senate, where Democrats hold the majority by a razor-thin 50-50 margin, with the Vice President Kamala Harris as the tiebreaker. Party leaders have promised swift but deliberate consideration of the president's nominee. The president also making some remarks about her qualifications.
For too long, our government, our courts, haven't looked like America. And I believe it's time that we have a court reflects the full talents and greatness of our nation with a nominee of extraordinary qualifications. And that we inspire all young people to believe that they can one day serve their country at the highest level. I've admired these traits of pragmatism, historical perspective, wisdom, character in the jurists nominated by Republican presidents as well as Democratic presidents. And today, I'm pleased to introduce to the American people a candidate who continues in this great tradition. Judge Jackson grew up in Miami, Florida. And by the way, the mayor of Miami, Republican, endorsed you. I thought that was interesting. Her parents grew up with segregation, but never gave up hope that their children would enjoy the true promise of America. Her parents graduated from historic black colleges and became public school teachers. Her mom, a principal. Her dad, a teacher who later went back to school and became a lawyer representing that very school district, that school board. Judge Jackson describes finding her love for the law from an apartment complex at the University of Miami where her dad was attending law school. She'd draw in her coloring book at the dining room table next to her dad's law books. She grew up to be a star student, elected mayor of her junior high school and president of her high school class, where she was a standout. She was a standout in the speech and debate team. And it was after a debate tournament that took place at Harvard when she was in high school that she believed she could one day be a student there. There were those who told her she shouldn't set her sights too high, but she refused to accept limits. others set for her. She did go on to Harvard undergraduate school, where she graduated magna cum laude. She went to attend Harvard Law School, where she was a top student and editor of the prestigious Law Review. Then she applied for a highly competitive and coveted clerkship on the United States Supreme Court, and she was selected. The justice who thought she was worthy of this high honor was a young lawyer, was none other than Justice Stephen Breyer, whose seat I'm nominating her to fill. Not only did she learn about being a judge from Justice Breyer himself, she saw the great rigor through which Justice Breyer approached his work. She learned from his willingness to work with colleagues with different viewpoints, critical qualities, in my view, for any Supreme Court justice. Now, years later, she steps up to fill Justice Breyer's place in the court with a uniquely accomplished and wide-ranging background. She served both in public service as a federal public defender, and in private law practice as an accomplished lawyer and with a prestigious law firm. If confirmed, she will join Justice Sotomayor as the only other member of the United States Supreme Court who has experience as a trial court judge, a critical qualification in my view, and once again, following the footsteps of her mentor, Justice Breyer, she'd become the only member of the court who previously served as a member of the United States Sentencing Commission. And she brings additional perspective to the court as well. She comes from a family of law enforcement, with her brother and uncles having served as police officers. That's one reason I expect by the Fraternal Order of Police, the national organization today, said, and I quote, "There's little doubt she has the temperament, the intellect, and the legal experience and family background have earned disappointment." And they went on to say, they're confident she will, quote, "approach her future cases with an open mind and treat issues related to law enforcement fairly and justly." Incredibly, Judge Jackson has already been confirmed by the United States Senate 3 times. First, to serve on the U.S. Sentencing Commission, a bipartisan independent commission I helped design to reduce the unwarranted disparities in sentencing and promote transparency and fairness in the criminal justice system. On the commission, Judge Jackson was known for working with Democrats and Republicans to find common ground on critical issues. Second, she was confirmed by the United States Senate with bipartisan support on the federal district court to administer justice with the special rigors and fairness that come with presiding over trials. And third, she was confirmed with bipartisan Senate vote to serve on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, considered the second most powerful court behind the Supreme Court itself, and the court she once argued cases before as a distinguished advocate.
President Biden at the White House, standing beside the nominee, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Also there, Vice President Kamala Harris, and in the audience, the First Lady, Jill Biden, and Second Gentleman, Doug Inhofe. After the president finished introducing the judge, Judge Jackson made some remarks of her own. She started with thanking God and her family.
I must begin these very brief remarks by thanking God for delivering me to this point in my professional journey. My life has been blessed beyond measure, and I do know that one can only come this far by faith. Among my many blessings, and indeed the very first, is the fact that I was born in this great country. The United States of America is the greatest beacon of hope and democracy the world has ever known. I was also blessed from my early days to have had a supportive and loving family. My mother and father, who have been married for 54 years, are at their home in Florida right now, and I know that they could not be more proud. It was my father who started me on this path when I was a child, as the president mentioned. My father made the fateful decision to transition from his job as a public high school history teacher and go to law school. Some of my earliest memories are of him sitting at the kitchen table, reading his law books. I watched him study, and he became my first professional role model. My mother, who was also a public high school teacher, provided invaluable support in those early days, working full-time to enable my father's career transition while also guiding and inspiring 4-year-old me. My only sibling, my brother Ketanji, came along half a decade later, and I'm so proud of all that he's accomplished. After graduating from Howard University, he became a police officer and a detective on some of the toughest streets in the inner city of Baltimore. After that, he enlisted in the Army, serving 2 tours of duty in the Middle East. I believe that he was following the example set by my uncles who are in law enforcement. You may have read that I have one uncle who got caught up in the drug trade and received a life sentence. That is true. But law enforcement also runs in my family. In addition to my brother, I had 2 uncles who served decades as police officers, one of whom became the police chief in my hometown of Miami, Florida.
Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson of the Federal Appeals Court D.C. Circuit, now a Supreme Court nominee, today at the White House with the president who has nominated her. She went on in her remarks to thank those who have inspired and guided her legal career, including Justice Stephen Breyer, for whom she clerked and, if confirmed, will replace. And she ended by talking about the historic nomination that she is now representing as the first black woman who could serve on the high court.
As it happens, I share a birthday with the first black woman ever to be appointed as a federal judge, the Honorable Constance Baker Motley. We were born exactly 49 years to the day apart. Today, I proudly stand on Judge Motley's shoulders, sharing not only her birthday, but also her steadfast and courageous commitment to equal justice under law. Judge Motley's life and career has been a true inspiration to me as I have pursued this professional path. And if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed as the next Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, I can only hope that my life and career, my love of this country and the Constitution, and my commitment to upholding the rule of law and the sacred principles upon which this great nation was founded will inspire future generations of Americans. Thank you again, Mr. President, for this extraordinary honor.
Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson at the White House. Again, President Biden nominating her, Vice President Harris standing beside. Democratic Senator Dick Durbin, chair of the Judiciary Committee, which will handle the nomination first, tweeting, "From a strong list of prospective candidates, President Biden has chosen an extraordinary nominee in D.C. Circuit Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. To be the first to make history in our nation, you need to have an exceptional life story. Judge Jackson's achievements are well known to the Senate Judiciary Committee as we approved her to the D.C. Circuit less than a year ago with bipartisan support. We will begin immediately to move forward on her nomination with the careful, fair, and professional approach she and America are entitled to." That series of quotes from Senator Dick Durbin, Judiciary Committee Chair. Ranking Republican on the committee, Chuck Grassley of Iowa, putting out a statement that reads, "As I always have, I'll make my determination based on the experience, qualifications, temperament, and judicial philosophy of the nominee." And Senator Grassley promising that Jackson will receive the most thorough and rigorous vetting. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, praising the nominee today at a news conference in New York City and also detailing when the Senate might take it up.
This historic nomination of Judge Jackson is an important step towards ensuring that the Supreme Court reflects the nation as a whole. As the first black woman Supreme Court justice in the court's 232-year history, she's going to inspire countless future generations of young Americans. Senate Democrats have spent the past year working with President Biden to shape a federal judicial system that fully represents America. And we will continue that trend by confirming Judge Jackson to the Supreme Court. I commend President Biden on undertaking a thoughtful deliberate selection process for the next Supreme Court justice. Now, on the timing. Once the President sends Judge Jackson's nomination to the Senate, Senate Democrats will work to ensure a fair, timely, and expeditious process, fair to the nominee, fair to the Senate, and fair to the American public. Under Chairman Durbin's leadership, Judge Jackson will receive a prompt hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee in the coming weeks. After the Judiciary Committee finishes its work, I will ask the Senate to move immediately to confirm her to the Supreme Court. I have no doubt that Judge Jackson would make an outstanding Supreme Court justice. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson has been confirmed by the United States Senate on a bipartisan basis 3 times, and I expect and hope she will earn bipartisan support in the Senate. Okay? Okay, questions on this subject?
Yes, Senator. So, what kind of Republican about bipartisan support? How confident are you of that?
Well, look, Judge Jackson has an impeccable record as a judge and in her public service. She's been confirmed by the United States Senate on a bipartisan basis 3 times. So she's a highly qualified nominee, and I hope there will be a good number of Republicans supporting her. I don't see any reason why there shouldn't be.
Senator Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, Democrat from New York, holding a news conference in New York City as the Senate is out this week. They are back next week. When Judge Jackson was confirmed last year to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, 3 Republicans in the Senate did vote yes. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Lindsey Graham. Today, Senator Collins describing Judge Jackson as an experienced federal judge with impressive academic and legal credentials. But Senator Graham tweeting, the radical left has won President Biden over yet again. The attacks by the left on Judge Childs from South Carolina apparently worked, referring to another judge who was under consideration and for whom Senator Graham said that he would vote if she were nominated, federal judge Michelle Childs of Graham's home state of South Carolina. The Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell putting out a statement that reads in part, I understand Judge Jackson was the favorite choice of far-left dark money groups that have spent years attacking the legitimacy and structure of the court itself. But Senator McConnell also adding, I look forward to carefully reviewing Judge Jackson's nomination during the vigorous and thorough Senate process that the American people deserve. As the Supreme Court nomination process plays out in the Senate, first the meetings one-on-one with the senators, and then the Judiciary Committee hearing and votes, and then on the Senate floor, more debate and votes. You can follow it all on the C-SPAN networks. This is Washington Today, and now to Russia and Ukraine. This from Reuters. European Union states agreed to freeze any European assets of Russian President Vladimir Putin and his foreign minister on Friday as Ukraine's leader pleaded for faster and more forceful sanctions to punish Russia's invasion of his country. At the White House, Press Secretary Jen Psaki saying the U.S. will also sanction Russia's leaders personally.
The EU earlier today agreed to place sanctions and asset freezes on Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Russian foreign minister. Is the United States going to follow suit?
Following a telephone conversation President Biden held with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and in alignment with the decision by our European allies, the United States will join them in sanctioning President Putin and Foreign Minister Lavrov and members of the Russian National Security Team. I expect we'll have more specific details out later this afternoon.
That's the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki in the White House briefing room with reporters. Fortune magazine writes that according to official disclosures from the Kremlin, the Russian president earns an income of $140,000 and owns 3 cars, a trailer, and an 800-foot square apartment. He also uses a 1,600-foot square apartment in Moscow. But they add this, however, Putin's inner circle is extremely wealthy, suggesting the president is wealthier than the Kremlin lets on. And in fact, some estimates are that he is one of the richest people in the world. A spokesman for the Kremlin, Dmitry Peskov, holding a teleconference today with reporters and saying that Russia will be responding to the sanctions imposed by the U.S. and other countries.
Of course, retaliatory measures will follow. The rule of reciprocity will work here. As to whether they are symmetrical or asymmetrical will depend on the analysis of the restrictions that we will have to make. And obviously, in the course of this analysis, the main goal will be our own interests. The main goal we were pursuing amid never-ending sanctions was to provide full self-sufficiency and import substitution to reduce the dependence on foreign imports. We achieved this goal in many areas, and we have the potential to achieve it rapidly, where it hasn't been done yet.
That's Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, on a teleconference. That interpretation provided from Reuters. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg saying today that President Joe Biden and the leaders of other NATO member countries agreeing to send a portion of NATO's response force to help protect allies in the east following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. First time this force has been deployed. Stoltenberg holding a news conference at NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium, after that NATO leaders virtual summit.
Terry Schultz with NPR and DW. I want to know more about the deployment of the NRF forces, please. How many will be sent where, from where? How long will it take to get there? Thinking about military mobility, as always. And also, what has changed in your calculation about the threat to NATO territory that has led allies to make the decision to deploy this for the first time in history for the purposes of collective defense? Thank you.
Well, what has changed over the last days is, of course, that there's a full-fledged invasion of a partner, a country that borders several NATO allied countries. And this is the most serious security crisis we have faced in Europe for decades. And therefore, we have the High Readiness Force, we have the NATO Response Force, and that's the reason why we are deploying it, to, again, prevent any miscalculation, any misunderstanding that we are not ready to protect and defend all allies. And of course, this is something all allies have agreed to do. 30 allies agreed. But of course, especially those in the eastern part of the alliance are extremely concerned. They are close to this, the fighting in Ukraine, and they also border Russia, and they have seen not only the military buildup and the ongoing war in Ukraine, but they also seen the very threatening rhetoric. Because this goes far beyond Ukraine. This is about how Russia is actually challenging, contesting core values for our security, and demanding that NATO should withdraw all forces and infrastructure from almost half of our members. And they have stated that if we don't do that, if we don't meet their demands, there will be what they call military technical consequences. So we have to take this seriously, and that's exactly why we are now deploying the NATO Response Force for the first time in a collective defense context. And we speak about thousands of troops. We speak about air and maritime capabilities. They are already actually part of the standing naval groups. We have many planes operating in the eastern part of the alliance, and then several allies have partly already assigned troops and forces to the NATO Response Force. We have the lead elements, which are led by France. We have the United States, which has assigned thousands of troops to the NATO Response Force, and these will be deployed to different places in the eastern part of the alliance. Well, they are partly coming from the United States, but these are also very much European troops. For instance, the lead element, the VJTF, the High Readiness Joint Task Force, is now led by France. There's a strong German component there, and other allies also part of that.
The NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg news conference at NATO headquarters in Brussels. Another AP story, the Kremlin says that prospects for possible peace talks between Russia and Ukraine look uncertain due to apparent differences over a venue. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov saying that Russian President Putin has agreed to send a delegation for talks with Ukrainian officials in Minsk, Belarus, where President Lukashenko runs a pro-Russian government. That agreement came in response to Ukrainian President Zelensky's offer earlier in the day to discuss non-aligned status for Ukraine. Peskov telling reporters that after the parties discussed Minsk as a possible venue, Ukrainian officials changed course and said they were unwilling to travel to Minsk and would prefer to meet in NATO member Poland. They then halted further communication, according to Peskov, all reported from AP. At the State Department in Washington, a question about peace talk prospects to spokesman Ned Price.
There was this proposal, the Chinese Chinese proposal the Russians seem to have picked up on, at least for an hour or so, about talks between Russia and Ukraine happening in Minsk. I know the Secretary spoke to Foreign Minister Kuleba today. What's your thinking about the efficacy of such talks?
Well, Matt, you've heard us say before that over the course of several weeks leading up to the events that we've seen recently in Ukraine, the assault on Ukraine, its sovereignty, its territorial integrity, and really its people, that Moscow engaged in a pretense of diplomacy. That was before the invasion started. Now we see Moscow suggesting that diplomacy take place at the barrel of a gun, or as Moscow's rockets, mortars, artillery target the Ukrainian people. This is not real diplomacy. Those are not the conditions for real diplomacy. We and our allies have called for a real diplomatic solution from day one. President Zelensky, for his part, has repeatedly reached out to President Putin, but his outstretched hand at every turn was met now by silence and now bombs. If President Putin is serious about diplomacy, he knows what he can do. He should immediately stop the bombing campaign against civilians, order the withdrawal of his forces from Ukraine, and indicate very clearly, unambiguously to the world that Moscow is prepared to de-escalate. We have not seen that yet.
State Department spokesman Ned Price with reporters in the State Department briefing room. At the United Nations in New York City, the Security Council meeting to consider a resolution offered by the United States and Albania condemning Russia's attack on Ukraine, requiring its forces to withdraw. By the way, Russia is president of the Security Council this month and has a veto power in the Security Council. That's happening as we go to air and is airing on C-SPAN television. You can follow it on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. U.S. intelligence officials expressing concern that Ukraine's capital city, Kyiv, could be in Russian hands within days, according to multiple reports. For instance, one former senior U.S. intelligence official telling Newsweek, after the air and artillery end and the ground war really starts, I think Kyiv falls in just a few days. He said the Ukrainian military could hold out, but this isn't going to last long. Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S., Oksana Marakova, held a news conference at the Ukrainian embassy in Washington, D.C.
The second day was even harder. The attacks have been more brutal, but I'm very pleased to say that they were not successful, definitely not successful as the enemy planned them. So the picture of air raids, tank marches, and rocket shelling of Ukrainian cities are reminiscent of the scenes that the world community has not seen since the World War II. And I'm sure that, like all people in Ukraine, people throughout the globe, in Europe, and definitely here in the United States, are surprised to see, or shocked, I should say, to see these battles in the streets of Kyiv and around Kyiv, but also everywhere in Ukraine. In the last 48 hours, but especially in the last 24 hours, the intense battles continued in Cherkasy, Chernihiv, Mariupol, Kherson, Kharkiv, and other cities of Ukraine. But I want to assure you that the spirit of Ukrainian army and the spirit of Ukrainian people and the spirit of Ukrainian territorial defense remain strong. The commendable fighting spirit has been demonstrated yesterday when 13 soldiers were posted on the Serpent Island on the south of Ukraine. It's a small Ukrainian border patrol outpost in Black Sea. They all refused to surrender to the Russian battleship. They all were killed. And our president just recently said that all these 13 people will be the heroes of Ukraine, and they will be recognized as heroes of Ukraine. But moreover, every Ukrainian women, and men who are fighting today for our country. They all are heroes, and we all are defending our home.
Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, Oksana Marakova, at the Ukrainian embassy in Washington, D.C. There's also this from CNN. The head of Russia's space agency said that U.S. sanctions in response to Russia's attack on Ukraine could destroy cooperation on the International Space Station. President Biden has said that some of the sanctions will degrade Russia's aerospace industry, including its space program. Russia's space chief indicated that blocking cooperation with the country could result in the station going into an uncontrolled deorbit and crashing to Earth. The Russian side of the ISS controls the station's propulsion. The U.S. side controls the electricity. A NASA spokesman said the agency continues to work for safe operations with all international partners, including Russia's space program. That story from CNN. Washington Today continues in a minute.
I can report to the nation, America is on the move again.
Live Tuesday, March 1st, the State of the Union. President Biden addresses a joint session of Congress and the nation, reflecting on his first year in office and laying out his agenda for the year ahead. Live coverage begins at 8 p.m. Eastern. The president speaks at 9, followed by the Republican response, and will take your phone calls and social media reaction. The State of the Union Address, live Tuesday, March 1st at 8 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN, cspan.org, or on the C-SPAN Now video app.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now video app and wherever you get your podcasts. A story in the Tampa Bay Times in Florida. Evoking the Cuban Revolution, Senator Marco Rubio said Friday that Democrats are leading the U.S. in the same direction of tyranny that prompted refugees to flee to Florida. As he said, Marxism becomes infused in the modern political debate. In a roughly 15-minute speech to the Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC, Rubio told attendees gathered in the hotel ballroom about his roots in Miami and how he's grown up surrounded by people who fled oppression. And this Tampa Bay Times story goes on. He then shifted to the ongoing war in Ukraine, the result of an invasion ordered by Russian President Vladimir Putin, as a reminder of the stakes.
No matter where you stand on this Ukraine-Russia situation, what we should have done beforehand, what we should do now, the one thing I think everyone can agree upon is that the people of Ukraine are inspiring to the world. I don't know if you've watched the images in the last 48 hours, okay? You have 70-something-year-old men, elderly women, younger children taking up arms, prepared to sacrifice everything. I don't know if you heard the audio of those 13 defenders of this Snake Island where the Russian ship says, surrender, this is Russian ship, surrender, and they respond, in French about what the Russian ship should go do. No matter how you feel, everything, and here's what it reminds you of. It reminds you how valuable freedom and liberty is. These are people that are basically saying, we refuse to be Putin's slaves. We refuse to live under tyranny, and we're prepared to give our life and die for it. And what it reminds us of, it should remind us of two things. How precious freedom and liberty is. How quickly it can be lost. And the second thing it should remind us is that the reason why we've had freedom and we've had liberty is because people at one point were willing to do that for our country here. They were willing to die, and they were willing to sacrifice for it. Freedom and liberty are being threatened again, but no one here is being asked to die. No one here is being asked to take up arms to defend it. We're being asked to win elections, to speak out, to be courageous, to raise our voices, to call it out for what it is, and it's happening.
Senator Marco Rubio, Republican from Florida. He's also vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference meeting this year in Orlando, Florida. And he referenced that audio of the Ukrainian soldiers defending Snake Island, telling a Russian warship to go F yourself when they were asked to surrender. Reports are all 13 Ukrainian soldiers on that island died in the Russian attack. Another Republican point of view about Russia and Ukraine at the CPAC coming from Congressman Jim Banks of Indiana. He's a military veteran. He's interviewed by Mercedes Schlapp, who was White House Strategic Communications Director under former President Trump.
Obviously, we're seeing the Russian aggression into Ukraine. Now we're seeing Ukraine mobilize their troops, try to see if they can fight against a massive army. I mean, when you're watching this from obviously being a congressional member, how do you think the Biden administration should be handling this? And also talk a little bit about Afghanistan. But first, let's talk Russia.
Well, we can't get to Russia before talking for a moment about Afghanistan. I served in uniform in Afghanistan. It was the proudest moments of my life was putting on the uniform and serving my country. And to this moment, as I sit here with all of you today, it makes me sick to my stomach to see the way that Joe Biden embarrassed America on the world stage. But Putin, Xi, Iran, all of our adversaries were watching that moment, and that's why they're seizing on this moment, a moment of unparalleled and historic American weakness to act out and do what they've always wanted to do. In Putin's case, to invade Ukraine. He knew he could get away with it because he had Joe Biden figured out the day that Joe Biden came into office. He knew that this was the moment that he had been waiting for. After 4 years of a very strong president, this would have never happened on Donald Trump's watch. But Putin gamed it out. He knew that when Joe Biden became the president, he could get away with it. And I fear that Xi and the Chinese Communist Party, they know that they can get away with invading Taiwan as well because of this very historic, weak moment for America. So that's what makes me sick to my stomach about Ukraine as well. As a member of Congress, I went to Ukraine a couple of years ago. I went out in the east on an army base where I watched firsthand American troops training the Ukrainian troops to fight back against Russian aggression. That was on Donald Trump's watch as commander-in-chief. And what we are seeing before our eyes, if you go on Twitter right now or online, any of the platforms, Truth Social, any of the platforms online, you'll see videos of the Ukrainian soldiers fighting back, and thank God. They're doing that because we helped them, we trained them, we gave them our American fighting spirit along the way, and we're seeing them use it.
Right, and we have troops on the ground in Poland. I mean, what's your message to them?
This is a historic moment for America to lead, and right now while we have a president and commander-in-chief who is not a leader, we have young men and women who are brave, who raised their right hand like I did to protect and defend American freedom and values. And at this point, though, my message to the world is this was completely avoidable, but better days lie ahead. 2022, November is here. It's right around the corner. At that moment, we're going to take back our country from the radical left who is trying to tear it down.
Congressman Jim Banks, Republican from Indiana, interviewed by former White House aide Mercedes Schlapp at the Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC, in Florida. Former President Donald Trump will be speaking to the conference on Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern. You can listen live on C-SPAN Radio. It'll also be on C-SPAN Television and, of course, on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. This from Fox News. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton repeatedly suggested during a Friday MSNBC interview that former President Donald Trump and members of the Republican Party were responsible for enabling Russian President Vladimir Putin in his aggression against Ukraine. Appearing on Morning Joe, Clinton accused Trump of giving aid and comfort to Putin amid the ongoing invasion, and claimed that Republicans were playing into the ambitions to undermine democracy by viewing Putin as a strong leader who aligned with their values. Here is a minute of that interview.
I do think it's important to support both the Ukrainian military and then, depending upon what happens and how quickly events unfold, supporting those who are putting up resistance. But I want to make another point, which is that we have to also make sure that within our own country, we are calling out those people who are giving aid and comfort to Vladimir Putin, who are talking about what a genius he is, what a smart move it is, who are unfortunately being broadcast by Russian media, not only inside Russia, but in Europe, to demonstrate the division within our own country. I just published an article about the national security emergency for democracy, and it starts here at home, where we have to be much more united in the face of what is a very real threat from Vladimir Putin and his imperialistic ambitions.
Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State under President Obama, and the 2016 Democratic presidential nominee who lost to former President Donald Trump, referring to some comments that the former president made regarding Putin's invasion of Ukraine. That interview on MSNBC. And you're listening to Washington Today. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention announcing some changes to the federal face mask guidance for indoor wearing, and the result will be most Americans will no longer be advised to wear them. The old standard was to recommend masks for people in areas with substantial or high transmission of COVID-19, and that currently covers about 95% of counties in the United States. CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky explaining in a teleconference today the new way to assess the risk.
Today, CDC is updating its framework to monitor the level of COVID-19 in communities. We're in a stronger place today as a nation with more tools to protect ourselves and our communities from COVID-19, like vaccination, boosters, broader access to testing, availability of high-quality masks, accessibility to new treatments, and improved ventilation. Over 200 million people have received a primary vaccine series, and nearly 100 million have been boosted, and millions more have had prior disease. With widespread population immunity, the overall risk of severe disease is now generally lower. Now, as the virus continues to circulate in our communities, we must focus our metrics beyond just cases in the community and direct our efforts toward protecting people at high risk for severe illness and preventing COVID-19 from overwhelming our hospitals and our healthcare systems. This new framework moves beyond just looking at cases and test positivity to evaluate factors that reflect the severity of disease, including hospitalizations and hospital capacity, and helps to determine whether the level of COVID-19 and severe disease are low, medium, or high in a community. The COVID-19 community level we are releasing today will inform CDC recommendations on prevention measures like masking. And CDC's recommendations for layered prevention measures will depend on the COVID-19 level in the community. This updated approach focuses on directing our prevention efforts towards protecting people at high risk for severe illness and preventing hospitals and healthcare systems from being overwhelmed. To find your community level, we are updating the CDC's website to reflect this framework. So people will be able to go to www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO to find your community level and what prevention strategies are recommended, including where or when to mask. Please remember that there are people who remain at higher risk for COVID-19 and who may need additional protection. Those who are immunocompromised or have underlying health conditions, those who have disabilities, or those who live with people who are at risk. Those people might choose to take extra precautions regardless of what level their community is in.
The CDC Director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, on a teleconference today. CNN has an article, the update to CDC guidance on masks comes at a time when daily COVID-19 cases in the United States have fallen to a tenth of what they were at their peak last month, according to data from Johns Hopkins University. The 90% drop from an average of more than 802,000 cases per day to less than 75,000 currently happened over the course of about 6 weeks. On Wall Street, the Dow up 834, NASDAQ up 221, S&P up 95. AP has a story, an inflation gauge that's closely monitored by the Federal Reserve jumped 6.1% in January compared with a year ago. Latest evidence that Americans are enduring sharp price increases that will likely worsen after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This from the Oklahoma newspaper. Senator Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma plans to resign the seat he has held since 1994, setting up what could be major changes to the state's political landscape just weeks before candidate filing. Inhofe, 87 years old, said in an interview Thursday that he and his wife Kay have decided that we need to have time together. C-SPAN interviewed Senator Inhofe way back in 1994 in November, right after he was sworn in for the first time.
What do you think taking the Senate seat is going to change as far as your family's life? How much time you spend here in D.C. as opposed to the state?
I don't think it'll change. I've always lived in Oklahoma and I commute. Their hours here in the Senate are a little different. In the House, it's 3 days a week of actual voting and committee meetings. In the Senate, it's 4 days a week, but every fourth week is off where you can be back in the district. So I will continue to live in Oklahoma. I've often said that if all of our members of the House and the Senate lived in their own states, we wouldn't have the problems that we have up here.
Well, after 4 terms in the House, why run for the Senate?
Well, the Senate deals with a lot of things the House doesn't deal with. One of the big problems we're having in this country is the confirmation of some of the appointments to the judiciary that are coming under the Clinton administration. 2 of the last judges that were confirmed don't believe in the death penalty. It just kind of confirms that the majority of people in Congress don't believe that punishment's a deterrent to crime. I do believe, and I think that the new wave that was elected on November 8th agree with me philosophically on a lot of these things. The Senate also deals with a lot of foreign policy things that the House does not concern itself with. And lastly, I guess if I've done anything that has gotten a lot of notice around the country, it's been the reforms, like the discharge petition reform. I can do that so much more effectively as one of 100 people instead of one of 435 people. So there are those reasons. And then there's always my wife to be considered too, and she doesn't like the idea of elections every 2 years.
But you'll be up for re-election in
96.
2 years because you're taking
That's
Senator
right.
Bourne's seat.
It's an unexpired term, and that's the reason that I'm being sworn in now, and will have seniority, I guess, over the rest of them.
Senator James Inhofe, Republican from Oklahoma, way back in November 1994, right after he won his first race in the Senate and was sworn in. That interview from C-SPAN's video library at cspan.org. Inhofe went on to win again in 96, and then in 2002, 2008, 2014, and 2020. And Senator Inhofe tweeting today, "It is bittersweet, but with a clear heart that Kay and I announced that at the end of the year, I will retire from the United States Senate." Inhofe has endorsed his chief of staff, Luke Holland, to replace him. Republican primary in the special election is June 28th. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. You can get more top Washington stories sent to you each day with C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word. Subscribe at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night and a good weekend.